and that they can find it for free elsewhere. So these news outlets should do the same thing. And attention spans are getting less online, and people want quick fixes, which is again sad. And I'm not sure how you battle that with the meaningful stuff, with investigative journalism. But it's just the reality of our world now.
Well, the theory is that the more tabloid-style journalism pays for the investigative journalism, and that was always the rationale when all those stories started appearing.
Are we seeing more investigative journalism?
Well, you're still seeing it, I suppose. It'd be interesting to do a comparison. Before we go, this week is Multiples Awareness Week, both here and abroad, and Ainsley Jacobson, the president of Multiples New Zealand, says transitioning, this is, twins and triplets, says transitioning from child to young adult is a hard work. It can be even more challenging for teenage twins and triplets. Not only do they have to separate from their parents, they also have to separate from each other. And on this same subject, Lord has turned 20 and has penned an essay on the topic of leaving the teen years. And she says, "All my life I've been obsessed with adolescence, drunk on it. Even when I was little, I knew that teenagers sparkled. I knew they knew something children didn't know, and adults ended up forgetting. My first album was my way of enshrining our teenage glory, putting it up in lights forever so that part of me never dies." Were your teenage years glorious? Has your magic died? When did the spark go out?
You're going to ask the old person, are you? I again go back to Pollyanna. My response is to say that actually every stage of my life has been glorious and wonderful, and I'm grateful for it.
Well said.
I do think that the capacity to think in black and white was something I wish I still had. The absolute certainty was a fantastic benefit in my life, and that doesn't really exist any longer. But there's a lot of other things that I have been delighted by attaining as I have lost spots and less angst.
Okay, so the glory is not just between 13 and 19. Do you agree?
Oh, I was such a raged and melancholy teenager, but I was also full of hope, the hope of becoming an adult finally, and knowing what I was going to do, and being that, the certainty and the black and whiteness is just talked about. It was absolutely true. But I feel like I did lose a sparkle, because adulthood wasn't all that I had envisioned it to be. And I think I was left a little bit disappointed with becoming completely independent and having the ability to make my own choices. So I'm forever searching for that sparkle. I'm always chasing it.
Okay, and that's fairly said too, but you wouldn't want to remain in those teenage years forever. You were happy enough when they were over?
I was happy when they were over, but I cling onto something from those years. But would I want to be a teenager again? Probably not.
I had such low expectations of what adulthood would be like that, in fact, it's been fine.
It's been a pleasant surprise.
It's been a pleasant surprise.
Michael Moynihan, thank you so much.
Nice to talk to you.
Golnaz Bassam Tabar, nice to see you again.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We're back. No, we're not back tomorrow with the panel, because it'll be an extended election special with John Campbell, but I'm back on afternoons, and the panel returns on Thursday.
Kia ora everyone, tonight it's election eve. Vote says Clinton, vote says Trump, vote says Obama, vote says Springsteen. The list goes on. We have top-notch correspondents and the US ambassador. A tree falls on toddlers at an Auckland daycare centre. Our reporter is there. The NZME and Fairfax marriage is off. What does that mean for the newspapers and the staff in both stables? Vicky Latelli back in hospital, then back in jail after she was returned to Wiri. I spoke to her family. Ruru School in Southland finally writes a letter to parents about its seclusion room, saying it isn't one, and the Joseph Parker title fight will be in Auckland. 90 minutes of top-notch and relevant current affairs starting after the pips and the news.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. No, Heidi, good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. Anxious parents rushed to check on their children this afternoon after a tree fell in the playground of an Auckland childcare centre, injuring 4 of them. 2 youngsters are in a serious condition in Starship Hospital. The other 2 have been treated for moderate injuries. Carla Penman reports.
Emergency services were called to Discovery's Educare on Gillies Ave in Epsom just before 2 o'clock. The playground resembles a bomb site, with the massive trunk of the tree and its branches splayed across it. A worker next door described hearing the tree crack before it fell. A woman picking up her 4-year-old daughter, who was not injured, blamed the wind for the accident. The police and 2 WorkSafe inspectors are at the scene continuing their investigations. The owners, who run 13 childcare centres throughout Auckland, could not be reached for comment. Ko Carla Penman tēnei.
A man who fatally stabbed his foster daughter in Lower Hutt has been sentenced to life imprisonment. Paul Keith Skipper must spend at least 16 years behind bars before parole can be considered. He was sentenced today in the High Court in Wellington for the April attack. Skipper was the foster parent of Te Awhia Huatoko, who was 17. He attacked her with a boning knife after she was packing to move to her boyfriend's house. Skipper read a letter to the court apologising for taking the young woman's life and saying she was a bright light in the world, which he extinguished.
No, she did not deserve what I did. Yes, she deserved to be loved, cared for, to enjoy a long and happy life. I am sorry, it is the only thing I can offer, because even now I have no understanding or explanation for the why.
Skipper said he knew he had betrayed his relationship with her family and their trust in him, and he was sorry for hurting them. The Prime Minister doesn't accept that the divide between the rich and the poor is getting wider. Official figures show the elderly and beneficiaries have been hardest hit by inflation, with superannuitants costs rising 19% in the past 8 years and beneficiaries by 16%. That's double the rate of inflation experienced by the highest spenders. While retirees spend more on insurance, council rates and energy, John Campbell says the average weekly earnings used to index super payments has risen 27% over the same period.
If you look at the increase in New Zealand super over the period of time we've been in office, it's been quite dramatic relative to the overall inflation rate. So you can obviously always pick out probably one specific item, but overall New Zealand super is up dramatically over that time when inflation is low.
John Campbell. Unions say beneficiaries have not been so lucky, with benefits rising at a slower pace than their costs. An Invercargill school being investigated about the use of a seclusion room is not cooperating with the inquiry. The police are investigating a complaint of undue restraint of a 9-year-old boy at Ruru School. Ian Telfer reports from Invercargill.
Ruru Specialist School in Invercargill is one of 8 at the centre of a special investigation by the Chief Ombudsman about the use of the rooms for pupils with difficult behaviours. In a letter to parents, Ruru's principal, Erin Cairns, has defended what she calls the school's safe room, saying it complies with Ministry of Education guidelines. She rejects the term seclusion. But she also says after getting legal advice, the school staff are refusing to be interviewed by the police. RNZ News has been told Mrs Cairns is also not cooperating with officers, though she won't confirm this. In Invercargill, ko Ian Telfer, tēnei.
Charges have been laid against 2 men over a fatal crash in which 4 people died in Waikato. The pair, both 20, are charged with street racing causing death and street racing causing injury. The crash happened late at night on State Highway 3 near Ohopu in June. The 4 young people who died were in the car. The accused will appear in the Hamilton District Court next month. A Waikanae retiree says a remark by a Wellington GP at Parliament yesterday was so hurtful and insensitive that he had to walk out. Hugh Barnes gave an emotional submission at Parliament's Health Select Committee yesterday about voluntary euthanasia. He described the plight of his wife Val, who has multiple sclerosis, and pleaded with MPs to please help us. Mary English, the wife of Finance Minister Bill English, was next in line to present a personal submission and used the acronym MAD for medical assisted dying repeatedly to explain why she's opposed. Mr Barnes said today he didn't know who Dr English was other than a GP, but he felt he was being called mad.
She's perfectly entitled to have the opposite belief as mine, but I thought it was extremely insensitive to use that expression, mad, me having just given what I believe over something that I'm obviously very sensitive about. for good reason.
Hugh Barnes. It's 5 minutes past 5. And to sport, the promoters of Joseph Parker's heavyweight title fight in Auckland say they're prepared to take a financial loss to give him the home advantage. Parker will fight American-Mexican Andy Ruiz for the WBO world title on December 10th at Vector Arena. The chief executive of JUCO, Martin Snedden, says it'll cost more than $4 million to host the fight, but it's a risk they're willing to take.
There is a significant financial risk to us, but there's also a risk that if we allowed this opportunity to slip through our fingers and we didn't give Joseph the home advantage, because in any sport you play, the home advantage is something to be treasured and is something that statistically will tell you is so effective.
Martin Snedden. The National Rugby League champions Cronulla have sacked fullback Ben Barber after he tested positive to cocaine in the days after the Sharks' grand final triumph. The Auckland-based Breakers have suffered a major setback in their Australian National Basketball League campaign, with American import Ben Woodside ruled out for a couple of months with a serious foot injury. That's the news.
A multi-million-dollar fix for homelessness.
I have got a now problem, and so I've got to do something fast.
A final offer for junior doctors.
We have put an enormous amount of extra funding on the table, and it still isn't good enough. But we will not pay for days off.
The countdown to America's new leader.
Just a few hours away now, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump barnstorming through those all-important battleground states on this final day.
The sharp end of the news. Guy Espiner and Susie Ferguson. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, as America goes to the polls, we go to the key states that lead to the White House. And after 10, Tom Marcus, from member of a top-secret British Army unit to MI5 spy. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Weather now, the short forecast from our Met Service taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. For Northland all the way to Wellington, and that includes Coromandel Peninsula, Taupo, Taumaranui, Taihape. Fine for the rest of today. Cloudy periods develop tomorrow. A few showers from Taranaki southwards tomorrow evening. Mainly fine for the Bay of Plenty. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, showers becoming confined to north of Wairoa about now this afternoon. Becoming fine throughout tomorrow morning. However, a few afternoon showers expected around the ranges. Waited Upper, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Mostly fine, though a few showers later tomorrow. Buller, Westland and Fiordland, rain, heavy falls spreading north for the rest of today. Thunderstorms are possible, but the rain should clear from the south tomorrow. Otago and Southland, high cloud, a few spots of rain. That should clear up in the morning apart from a few coastal showers. For the Chatham Islands, cloudy, patchy drizzle. That should clear up in the morning, but a few showers develop again tomorrow afternoon. It is exactly 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. In a moment, the fallen tree in the daycare centre in Auckland. Our reporter is there. She'll join us live. Vicky Latelli, back in hospital, then back in prison. And the media merger gets declined. What now for the country's newspapers and the people who create them? But we begin in the US, where the race for the White House is, thank goodness, in the home straight. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have spent their final day on the campaign trail wooing swinging voters, of course, both heading at first to the industrial Midwest in an attempt to win Michigan, before Mr. Trump moved to North Carolina and Mrs. Clinton headed to Philadelphia. But as Alex Ashton reports, whilst rock group Bon Jovi and Bruce Springsteen rallied for Mrs. Clinton, Mr. Trump was on his own.
Strong words from Hillary Clinton on her final day on the campaign trail, as she and Donald Trump crisscrossed the United States in a final bid to sway undecided voters.
For people in our country who feel like they've been knocked down and nobody cares, nobody's paying attention, here's what I want you to know. If you give me the honor of being your president, I'm going to do everything I can to get this country and everybody in it back up on our feet, moving forward together.
Mrs. Clinton, supported by the US President Barack Obama, urging voters in Michigan to get out and vote.
We've got one more day, Michigan. One more day. I love you back. I do. But tomorrow, you will choose whether we continue this journey of progress or whether it all goes out the window. Tomorrow, you get to choose between a politics of blame and divisiveness and resentment, or you can choose a politics that says we're all stronger together.
Mr. Obama rallied supporters in Ann Arbor, telling the crowd Donald Trump was unfit to be president.
Over the course of these 8 years, all across 50 states, I've always seen what made America great. I have seen you. Americans of every faith, every background, Republicans and Democrats, who understand that we're stronger together. Young, old, men, women, black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, people with disabilities, gay, straight, all of us pledging allegiance to the red, white, and blue. That's the America I know, and there's only one candidate in this race who's devoted her life to that better America, and that is the next president of the United States, Hillary Clinton.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump, who started his day in Florida, moved to North Carolina and used the occasion to take a final swipe at his opponent.
So Obama is taking Air Force One, which costs a fortune. You know, he's very much into the environment, and he'll take a massive old engine 747, very much into the environment, very much into the ozone layer, and yet he'll fly that 747 all over the place to campaign for crooked Hillary.
And whilst the Clinton campaign rolled out Bruce Springsteen and Bon Jovi in Pennsylvania, Mr. Trump rolled out, well, Mr. Trump, and he told his supporters why.
And she's not getting any crowds, so she gets Beyonce and Jay-Z. I like them. I like them. And you know what they do? I get bigger crowds than they do. It's true. I get far bigger crowds. Look at this place. I mean, look at the crowds we had in Michigan. By the way, Michigan is in play. You know, it hasn't been in play for Republicans for 30-something years. Michigan's in play because they're tired of watching their car factories be taken out. They're tired of losing their jobs to Mexico. Ford right now moved all of its small car production to Mexico. They're building the biggest plants in the world in Mexico.
And it was that closure of mills and businesses which had these voters at a polling booth in Youngstown, Ohio, believing Donald Trump could bring life back to this once booming industrial town.
So why not a change? I mean, only thing I know for the last 8 years is the police are the criminals, and the criminals are good guys now.
Meanwhile, in New York City, security has been strengthened ahead of polling day.
Hoping there's a big turnout. At the end of the day, it's a free country and we have the right to vote, so people should exercise it no matter which way.
Police officers and their dogs continue to patrol the city's streets, with authorities remaining on high alert outside the Jacob Javits Centre, where Hillary Clinton will spend election night. There's also a heavy police presence outside Trump Tower, the campaign headquarters for the Republican team. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Let's go live to Washington, D.C. now, where our correspondent Nina Maria Potts is standing by. Nina Maria, it's lovely to have you with us. Thank you. What is the feeling tonight? There is a sense of growing confidence from the Clinton camp. Do you have any instincts about what's going to happen tomorrow?
Well, I mean, first of all, the race is very nearly over. It's been a frenzied campaign. We're just a few hours now away from the polls finally opening. And it's been a nasty, bitter campaign, as we all know. In fact, the American Psychological Association has just released a report confirming what many Americans suspected, which is this has been a very stressful election. And stress is exceptionally high, apparently, among Latino voters. I think that's down to the fact that it may not be over even when it's over. And certainly if it's a contested election, and at the moment Donald Trump is threatening to contest it and not accept the final result. The polls are still tight, and even if Hillary turns out to be squeaking past the goalposts, even though the latest polls, the very latest polls, suggest that she's doing much better than that in all swing states, the fact of the matter is that half of the country believes that she should be in jail and that she should be locked up. So it's very hard to imagine how America's next president even begins to speak the language of unity.
Yes, boy, that's a predicament, isn't it, for her if she becomes president. Florida, I suspect, is going to be preeminent among the states determining that. 29 votes. In 2000, they gave the election to Bush, despite the fact that he had fewer votes than Gore. It is, I think, by number, the 5th largest Hispanic state in terms of voter numbers. How is Florida going to go? Does anyone know?
I think it's going to be exceptionally tight in Florida, a 1-point margin by all accounts. Today, across the swing states, there's been a mega push. Donald Trump was in Florida, but also in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. Hillary similarly has been crisscrossing the country. We heard in your report just there that she was in Michigan, and she was out there trying to really persuade voters that went for Bernie Sanders, who she lost to Bernie Sanders in the primaries earlier this year, to come out and actually vote. Voter turnout is a huge issue. 44 million Americans have already voted in this election. That's a record turnout. In Florida and Nevada, Latino Americans appear to be persuaded by the Democrats. Asian Americans are also out in record numbers and seem to be moving over into the Democrats' camp. But again, as you say, it's very tight in Florida.
Nina Maria Potts, thank you so much, joining us live from Washington, D.C., sounding pretty exhausted, like everyone who is on the campaign trail. It has been a long, hard push. Tomorrow from 3, extensive coverage and a Checkpoint special as we find out who will be the next president of the United States. More on that subject later tonight, 5:16. 4 toddlers have been injured after a tree fell on them at an Auckland childcare centre this afternoon. Emergency services were called to Discovery's Educare on Gillies Ave in Epsom just before 2 o'clock, where it's understood around 25 children were playing outside. Our reporter Sally Murphy is there. Sally, what happened?
Well, like you said, emergency services were called to this daycare at about 1:40 this afternoon, where a tree has fallen on the children playing in the garden. From the driveway of the education centre, you can see the tree, which was on the side of the garden, has completely come out of the ground. The roots are visible, and it has fallen onto where the children would have been playing, including 2 little play huts. So children's parents have been rushing here all afternoon to pick up their children and try and figure out what's been happening. There's also been police here, and WorkSafe arrived to begin their investigation about 2 hours ago.
Yes, Sally, the picture's showing that it's a really big tree with branches spread far and wide across the playground. So it's absolutely no surprise children were hit by it because it's so big. Can you update us on the condition of the children who have been injured?
Well, a short time ago, St John confirmed that there were 25 children here. 3 have been taken to hospital. 1 is in a critical condition, 1 has serious injuries, and 1 has moderate injuries. St John said they did check all of the other children before they released to their parents, but he wouldn't go into detail about the injuries, and it was unclear whether any of the children were actually trapped under the tree.
Sally, any sign of the owners?
No, we've been trying to get in touch with the owners this afternoon. They also own the wellness centre next door to the daycare. We spoke to one of the employees there who said that one of the owners went to the hospital with the children, and the other owner has been working with WorkSafe and the Ministry of Education in their investigations. But the woman said that the daycare has been running for about 4 years, and since it opened, the trees on the property had actually been checked. She said that some trees had to be cut down, but the tree that fell today was actually deemed safe by an arborist.
Sally Murphy live from the scene. We will update you on the condition of the children. We're speaking to Starship about this, and the moment we know more, we will bring you that information. Coming up to 5:19. Vicky Latelli, the terminally ill woman serving a 3-year prison sentence for fraud, has been back in hospital today, seeing oncologists over an intensive treatment program that begins this Thursday. Latelli is 8 months into her prison sentence. She became seriously unwell in prison and was diagnosed as being terminally ill 2 months ago, at which stage she was given roughly 6 months to live. Her most recent oncology report describes her condition as incurable. Her family have been campaigning for a compassionate release, receiving support from across the political spectrum. But she remains in hospital, with corrections saying they can provide the care she needs alongside hospital visits. This morning, her family called to say she was back in hospital after she was taken back to prison in a corrections car, which we are seeing on the screen here. I asked her uncle, her partner, and first up her mother about her condition.
She's not good. Mentally, she's not good. She's sick. She needs to come home. She needs to come home.
Yeah, emotionally she's not in a good space, and we know the effects that has on, it's heartbreaking not being able to do anything for her.
Ula, what happened up there? That was an appointment with an oncologist, so Vicky has come in from Wiri to see who today?
She came in to see, if I can just say before answering that question, she's in a terrible state at the moment, John. It's actually inhumane and it's cruel what's happening to her, because the backwards and forwards, coming in and seeing the doctors and going back and then spending time in the hospital and seeing her family and not being able to be close to her when she needs them. She's in a terrible psychological state. She's not in a good place. She's a very strong girl spiritually, physically she's very strong, but mentally she's in a very dark place at the moment. She needs uplifting, she needs love, she needs an environment that actually cares for her, can put their arms around her any time that she needs. But to answer your question, we've just spent a follow-up of Vicky's treatment. It's the first session of what was meant to be a 6-week program, but they brought it forward. So now this coming Thursday, she commences the infusion part, where she has to be hospitalised to be given an injection on the...
So that's intensive chemotherapy?
Correct. It's the full strength chemotherapy. And then she has to undergo this every 21 days for the next 5 sessions. So the sort of things that can happen to her is that obviously her immune system is at great risk. And living in the situation that she has at the moment, where it's just the response time that's been provided to her is just totally inadequate. We need to have her somewhere where she needs to either have the doctor or needs to have any medical transfer to the hospital to take care of her situation, that it can be immediate. We've had the prior 7 weeks was quite a disaster in the facility not being able to take care of her. She's just undergone 7 days of hospitalisation, which obviously in itself is an admission that the facility cannot take care of her. And then we've had the most recent incident whereby she was requiring medical assistance during the early hours of the morning, and the caregivers were found asleep. It took them 3 hours to respond to it. So when the facility is saying that they can take care of her, obviously there's so much evidence that says the contrary. But more importantly, all of the medical profession, people that are specialised in the care of terminal cancer patients, are saying what the corrections department is obviously saying that they can do, which they cannot.
I actually have here a letter from last week, the most recent letter I think from her consultant oncologist, and it says, we would have very much preferred her to undergo this chemotherapy and live at home with her family rather than in prison, especially in the context of an incurable cancer. You really can't get more explicit and singular than that.
No, you can't. And every day and every minute that she's away from us, you can't look after her. Give her back our girl. You can't look after our girl. You can't even do bloody drip. They can't put a drip on someone like Vicky in prison. And they're saying they can look after my girl. They couldn't for 7.5 weeks look after my girl. Now they're telling me they can't even put a drip into my girl if she gets down.
I'm sorry to quote from this consultant oncologist letter from last week again, but she says, I understand that there has been some delay in getting a response and sending her to hospital while she was sick. You have received assurances that Corrections is able to look after her. Is that consistent with that, Ula?
Every time they fail, it's just they're not able to take care of her. And what they say and what they actually do in action are totally two different things. The intention is there, but the actual application of that intention is sadly lacking.
Leah, as Vicky's partner, what needs to happen now?
They need to show some compassion and let her come home. So she'll be in a good environment a loving, caring environment. Anyone can administer a plaster and a Panadol, but they can't administer the love, and we know what love does for people. And that's what we want to surround her with. Yeah.
Tui, the chemotherapy starts on Thursday. Once again, corrections and the parole board have said if Vicky's condition deteriorates or if the corrections facility is unable to care for her, then this is something they can reconsider. Would you hope that they will reconsider this on Thursday?
John, sad day. They gave my daughter a baby's rattle. That was her bell. Sunday they gave her a bell where you have to use a teaspoon to bang it. Today she's got a proper bell. Will the parole board think about what she's doing, what's happening with her? I don't think so. I don't think Judith Collins will. Oh, why can't they do it today? Why can't they let her go today? She's no threat. She's no threat. No, she's no threat. Bring her home. Bring her home today, please. Bring her home. I'm so tired.
It's Vicky Latelli's mother, Tui, her partner, Leah, and her uncle, Ula, speaking outside the hospital as Vicky Latelli was being returned to Wiri Correctional Institute today. Meanwhile, while Vicky Latelli was sent back to prison after her oncology appointment, a jail term imposed on a former Victoria University accounts manager for fraud has been overturned so she can care for her young children. Rebecca Proctor was jailed for 2 years and 5 months in July after pleading guilty to taking almost $500,000 from her former employer, Victoria University. The High Court has now reversed that decision, and Proctor has instead been sentenced to 12 months home detention and 100 hours of community work. It's 5:27. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Big media news today with the competition regulator pouring cold water on a marriage between two of New Zealand's biggest media groups. Today's no ruling by the Commerce Commission to the Fairfax Media NZME union is a preliminary decision, but there's a widespread view that it will stick. The proposed link-up would have combined the New Zealand Herald, the Dom Post, the Press of Christchurch and many other newspapers into one unit, along with news websites and a raft of provincial newspapers, radio stations, you name it. That was the proposal. Here's Eric Frickberg on the decision.
Despite waves of cost-cutting and the shedding of many jobs, newspapers remain in a parlous financial state. The internet long ago stole their lucrative classified advertising. Now it's taken over their news content. NZME, which publishes the Herald, and Fairfax, whose titles include Dominion Post and the Press, want to fight back. Their plan? To combine their newspapers and news websites into one cheaper, more efficient unit. But the Commerce Commission has knocked back their plans, with its chairman Mark Berry saying he proposes to block the merger.
This would result in an unprecedented level of media concentration for a well-established liberal democracy.
Mark Berry cites other objections: domination of the news website business and domination of Sunday and provincial newspapers, with News Talk and other radio stations thrown in as powerful allies.
Removal of competitive tension would likely lead to a reduction in the quality and quantity of New Zealand news, both online and in print.
While the Commerce Commission's verdict is not final and is open to further submissions, it's unlikely to be overturned, according to former New Zealand Herald editor Gavin Ellis. He says the Commission believes the proposed merger would put too much power in the hands of one company, and its preliminary veto is likely to become a final one.
They have, I think, really stopped this dead in its tracks. The biggest issue in any environment, I think, is this one of the aggregation of media assets.
The man who succeeded him in the editor's chair, Tim Murphy, wholeheartedly agrees, saying the Commission's findings are formidable.
I think it is pretty damning. It debunks most of the arguments put forward by Fairfax and NZME and their lawyers. And I wouldn't think looks good for being overturned by March.
In turn, NZME and Fairfax have accused the Commission of not taking into account the diversity of opinions in a converged digital world. In other words, the profusion of content on the internet. The head of journalism at Massey University, Grant Hannis, shares this criticism.
The Commerce Commission has interpreted the market very narrowly. It's speaking basically about print media, but there's a much wider market for online news by a click of your mouse. NZME and Fairfax have been arguing that there's a much wider market for online news, but that hasn't persuaded the Commission, it would seem.
The rejection of the merger has been welcomed by Paul Tolich of the ETU Union, which represents journalists.
Those that gather the news are one of the most important functions of any democratic society. The media is not just has commercial objectives. There are social objectives in our society.
Both NZME and Fairfax plan to argue their case further. At stake are some of New Zealand's most venerable institutions, the Herald, the Press of Christchurch and the Dominion Post, all of which date back in one form or another for a century and a half. For Checkpoint, Ko Eric Frickberg-Tene.
Coming up on Checkpoint with the time at 29 minutes to 6, a specialist school at the heart of a row over the use of a seclusion room breaks its silence. The Joseph Parker fight will be in Auckland. This is the title fight. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Text us on 2101 on any of the subjects we have been covering. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We do really enjoy receiving your feedback. 28.5 to 6. Here's Paul Brennan with RNZ Headlines.
Thank you, John. In our headlines this afternoon, 3 young children are in Starship Hospital after a tree fell in the playground of an Auckland childcare centre this afternoon. One of the children is in a critical condition and another is in a serious condition. Emergency services were called to Discovery's Educare on Gillies Ave in Epsom just before 2 o'clock. A worker next door described hearing the tree crack before it fell. The police and 2 WorkSafe inspectors are at the scene. An Invercargill school being investigated about the use of a seclusion room is not cooperating with the inquiry. The police are investigating a complaint of undue restraint of a 9-year-old boy at Ururu School, one of 8 schools at the centre of an investigation by the Chief Ombudsman about the use of the rooms for pupils with difficult behaviours. In a letter to parents, Ururu's principal Erin Cairns has defended what she calls the safe room, saying it complies with Ministry of Education guidelines. Ms Cairns says after getting legal advice, the school staff are refusing to be interviewed by the police. A Lower Hutt teen fatally stabbed by her foster father lived in fear of him and was trying to escape when she was killed. Paul Skipper was jailed for life today by the High Court in Wellington and ordered to spend at least 16 years behind bars for the murder of 17-year-old Te Awhia Huatoko in April. He had attacked her with a boning knife as she was packing to move to her boyfriend's house. A body has been found in the Auckland Domain. The police say they were called to the park just before 4 o'clock after a member of the public discovered the body. The death is not considered suspicious. And the favourite Lazarus has cruised to victory in the New Zealand Trotting Cup at Addington and Christchurch. Ridden by Mark Purdon, Lazarus led for a large part of the race and crossed the line several lengths clear of the field. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 6.
Thanks, Paul. Business news next, but just before that, some sports news. Joseph Parker's former manager, Sir Bob Jones, has rubbish claims the New Zealand heavyweight is fighting for a world heavyweight title in Auckland. Parker's promoters, Duco Events, confirmed today Parker will fight Mexican Andy Ruiz for the WBO World Heavyweight title at Vector Arena on December 10th. However, as Matt Chatterton reports, Jones says New Zealanders shouldn't buy into the hype.
Joseph Parker's upcoming fight for the WBO world title will be his most important one to date. So far, the 24-year-old is undefeated in his 21 fights, while Ruiz, 3 years his senior, has won all of his 29 bouts. The fight has been touted as New Zealand's biggest boxing event since David Tua's unsuccessful world heavyweight title fight against Lennox Lewis, but Parker's former manager Sir Bob Jones disagrees. He says it's a rort to call it a world title fight.
All these outfits purport by their name, they have annual conferences to try and give themselves some sort of a thing. You can't have, imagine if there were 7 Olympic committees running 7 different Olympic games with 7 different Olympic champions in every event. Well, that's the exact situation you've got now. It's destroyed championship boxing.
Parker's promoters Duco Events have spent the last month trying to secure the fight in Auckland and were close to losing it to Ruiz's home country America when financial backing from the government and Auckland Council's events agency ATED fell through. Juco Chief Executive Martin Snedden says his company is prepared to take a financial loss in order to give Parker hometown advantage.
There is a significant financial risk to us, but there's also a risk that if we allowed this opportunity to slip through our fingers and we didn't give Joseph the home advantage, because in any sport you play, the home advantage is something to be treasured and is something that statistically will tell you is so effective.
The chance for this fight came about after British heavyweight Tyson Fury was stripped of his WBA and WBO world titles after failing to defend them against former champion Vladimir Klitschko. Sir Bob Jones says those two boxers should be considered world champions, not Parker or his opponent Andy Ruiz.
The Mexican, who is not even the best Mexican heavyweight, hasn't fought anyone, I think, in the top 50. And you try to tell me these two are fighting for the vacant world heavyweight title?
Jones says he would be willing to pay no more than $15 to watch the fight on Sky's pay-per-view system, the only way New Zealanders will be able to watch the fight at home. But in reality, the cost will be more than $50. Tickets for the fight go on sale later this week. For Checkpoint, Cormac Chatterton-Tine.
Matt says the cost will be more than $50. How much would New Zealanders be prepared to pay to watch the Parker fight? Eva Corlett went to ask people on the streets of Auckland.
I would, because I've always wanted to watch him. And probably one of my favourite fighters ever. More than $50, it's worth it.
I don't think so. I think it's because you shortly get footage of it afterwards, you know what I mean? YouTube, things like that. And it's good if I went into a pub and had a few drinks and sort of watched it from that perspective. But for me to pay for it at home, $40, do you know what I mean?
No, because it's way too expensive.
What would be the price you'd be prepared to pay?
Same price as MMA, UFC, $30.
I love Joseph Parker. I will pay more than $50 if I have to.
How much would you pay? What would be your top amount?
Well, it depends what the price is. 100 max.
I'm not really a big fight fan, but I got better things to do with $50.
Let's go from sports news to business news, possibly sometimes not terribly much difference. Jonathan Mitchell standing by. Tonight, as we've been reporting, Jonathan, the Commerce Commission comes out swinging really against the Fairfax and NZME merger. This is a strong preliminary decision.
That's right. We've seen the Commerce Commission again publicly flexing its muscles. We saw it initially with the Caltex Z Energy merger. It's certainly not shying away behind the scenes and acting low-key. It's looking like a tough, assertive regulator and in the public eye. It broke new ground essentially with the Sky and Vodafone merger, where it asked in the open letter and it raised competition fears and things about pricing. Today with Fairfax and NZME, it said it's not satisfied or inclined to approve the merger in its current form, given the power the one company might have over newspapers, radio and news websites. Certainly this gives a clear message to businesses that the Commerce Commission is willing to act tough and speak its mind. As a result, shares in NZME fell more than 20% today, ending at 50 cents each.
Gosh. OK, you've got some stuff from Statistics New Zealand about the impact of inflation on the elderly and beneficiaries. Now, the curious thing for me is I haven't seen any of this and I've been otherwise engaged, but there isn't any inflation, is there? So what's this about?
Well, this is certainly looking at what effects inflation has over the past decade on various age groups. So we're looking at retired people and beneficiaries in particular. Retired people spend more on items that have risen sharply, such as insurance, local council rates and energy bills. Higher rents affected beneficiaries the hardest. They also spent more on other things like cigarettes and alcohol.
Right, so accommodation inflation, which is just obviously been widely reporting, is really crippling people on low incomes, obviously.
Rampant at the moment too with the rampant house prices.
Yeah.
Also, some interesting points to come out of this data. Superannuitants costs increased 19% over roughly the past decade, and beneficiaries by 16%. This compares with the average household increase of 13%, so certainly above the average.
What happened on the markets today, Jonathan, on the eve of the US election? My guess is not much trading.
Well, that's right. You're pretty spot on there. Certainly global markets have a positive tone about them. Is on the eve as we get into the final few hours. The top 50 index had quite a solid finish yesterday. You'll remember 2.5%.
That's right.
Fairly muted today, just up 22 points to 6894. And the dollar is holding steady, trading at 73.3 US cents and just over 95 Australian. So we'll do it all tomorrow, John.
Yeah, we will. I look forward to that. Thanks, Jonathan. Really appreciate it. Jonathan Mitchell joining us live from Wellington. Obviously, the financial markets throughout the world have expressed a strong preference to Hillary Clinton, and we will, amongst all the things we're looking at tomorrow, we will look at the reaction of various markets when it becomes apparent who is going to be president. Speaking of which, Linda Scarparotti is a lawyer, human rights campaigner, and a singular campaigner for Hillary Clinton. She's just been in Nevada working with a huge influx of Democrats determined to take the swing state and its 6 votes. Nevada is a really reliable predictor. As a rule, where it goes, the country goes. So I asked her, who's going to take it?
Well, we believe it is going to go Democrat. But let's not discount that there are large pockets of very strong Republicans in Nevada who we encountered when we were out there doing our campaigning, some of whom were actually quite gracious and thanked us for our civic duty, even though they knew who we were. I don't know if you can see my Hillary. Let's see if I can get this a little better so you can see the Hillary apparel.
I can see the Hillary apparel now, and a rather beautiful.
Yes,
What's
okay.
that brooch? What's the chair you've got on your lapel?
Oh no, now that's all me. That's that's from the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
Lovely.
So,
well, New York is safe Democrat, so that makes sense, right?
Right, it does. So, I personally have been to 5 states myself, and of course, we're all doing this as volunteers, and that's what's so exciting is to see it. And I would say one of my best experiences was in Des Moines, Iowa, and I really love doing the door-to-door work, where you meet with people who actually come to their doors. That's not a common thing here, is for people to let strangers in, to open their doors to strangers. But there are many places in this country where people do it. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to then talk about the issues, what's of concern to them, why they're voting the way they are.
Can we talk about Florida? Because, boy, that is fascinating. Where Florida goes, once again, who's Florida going to vote for?
I want, fair disclosure, because I live way on the other side of the country, I can't tell you in the same way. I don't feel like I have the pulse, like I have the pulse of Florida. Like you can tell when you're out here and you're in these states here and you get a feel for it from talking to people. I think everyone feels ultimately that we will take Florida. Hillary Clinton will take Florida. But it's a tricky place, as you know. You remember all those hanging chads. Remember those hanging chads and all of the vote counting, and that the Supreme Court had to get involved with the counting of votes in Florida? Yes. So we don't take anything for granted there. You just can't. You can't take it for granted. There are a lot of poll watchers this year. Like in third world countries, we have poll watchers now in the United States to make sure that people are allowed to vote, they can exercise their right to vote, and are not turned away for various reasons, like show us a birth certificate or something that maybe unfairly impacts minorities, particularly African Americans in our country. So it's different. It's a very different election than we have experienced before. And you have had, obviously, an opposing candidate who has not had to buy, television time, radio time, advertising. We've never had that. Who is just given it by the media because of how I have to say, his acumen with the media and their desire to have him, even if it's a circus, to have him in the news 10 to 100 times a day on any given channel here. All free.
So if we look from afar,
yes,
what we see, and it's saddening to see it, is a heavily polarized society.
Yes.
And I mean, America
Yeah.
is, I mean, historically polarized in all sorts of ways, and we understand that. But there seems to have been more enmity and anger and a more visceral sense of disconnection this
Yes.
time round. Now, Trump is playing to that, and he's also playing to that as a strategy for if he loses. What happens to his constituency if Trump loses? What will they do? What will he encourage them to do?
Well, you're absolutely right about the polarization. It's so disheartening, and it's disheartening to see the kinds of things that are being played upon, as you've heard a million times, in terms of racial hatred and immigration, anti-immigration rhetoric, and just a general feeling of just it feels like hatred of the very thing that makes America great, to have managed to have a melting pot, to pull it off. And we have done that. We have done that. And to be going after that is horrifying. And it's so unsettling to all of us. One of the things that I know that they're already doing is, word has gone out that they will do everything in their power to block the appointment of Supreme Court justices. They will do everything in their power to block any legislation that Hillary Clinton would try to have passed with the support of the Senate. We're hoping for that majority in the Senate. We cannot get it in Congress. We can't get it there in the House of Representatives. We're just not going to be able to get it there. So they're going to fight hard, as they did against Obama. Obamacare, they're still going to work to bring it all down or to keep legislation from being passed. Will he challenge the election, just the voting itself? I don't think that he will in a legal, let me file a lawsuit kind of way, but I don't know. Maybe he will.
Linda Scaparotti, who is a lawyer, human rights campaigner, and a singular campaigner for Hillary Clinton, as you heard. A repeat child sex offender giggled as the Crown prosecutor made submissions on potentially jailing him for the rest of his life. 72-year-old Iosua Chan-Key was today sentenced to preventive detention with a minimum non-parole period of 10 years. The sentence means that he will only be released from prison if he can prove that he no longer poses a risk to the community. Our Auckland Court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
The Crown prosecutor Luke Clancy set out the extent of Iosua Chan-Key's offending that included repeatedly raping a young girl over 5 years at home, work and in the back of his car in a secluded part of a cemetery. It began shortly after Chan-Key got out of prison after serving a 9-year prison sentence for similar offending against other girls, described by the judge at the time as incomprehensibly appalling.
Mr Chan-Key continues to display absolutely no remorse whatsoever for his offending. He continues to simply deny it, including, somewhat preposterously at this stage, the 1990s offending. There's a suggestion that he continues to say that was a consensual relationship, notwithstanding his having served a very substantial term of imprisonment.
Mr Clancy told the court that if the Crown's bid for preventive detention was rejected, then Chan-Key should be jailed for 17 years. Chan-Key's lawyer, Hugh Leaborn, disagreed.
I know it's not traditional, sir, from the defence perspective to endorse preventive detention because it has that rather draconian sound of it being potentially incarcerated for the rest of your life until such time as the Minister of Justice finds it appropriate that you can be released. But my submissions are geared that, in essence here, preventive detention may in fact be more suitable not only to Mr Chan-Key, but to the community.
He said a lengthy sentence could result in Chan-Key having no prospect of ever getting out of prison. Mr Leaborn told the court Chan-Key had expressed sadness at what had happened and the effect on the children before Justice Gilbert cut in.
He did express that to me in his own and slightly different way.
He takes no accountability. He accepts no responsibility for his position, does he?
Correct. That he maintains his innocence.
You can't really talk about this in terms of remorse.
I'm trying to...
And he actually blames the victims.
Justice Gilbert said Chan Key went so far as to accuse the victims of conspiring against him. In sentencing, the judge said the damage done to one of the victims will likely last for the rest of her life.
You exploited her naivety and cynically groomed her for your selfish needs. You robbed her of her innocence and sexually preyed on her whenever you wanted throughout her teenage years. Your offending was so regular and prolonged that it became normal to her.
Justice Gilbert said Chan Key had refused to get rehabilitation during his previous sentence and remained at a high risk of reoffending.
In my view, a sentence of preventive detention is required to protect the community. Such a sentence has the advantage that it might motivate you to seek treatment to address the underlying causes of your offending.
Chan Key waved to a woman in the back of the court as he was led into the cells. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Edward Gay aho.
Coming up to 9 minutes to 6, the Labour Party is defending the costings for its job scheme policy for young unemployed people just 2 days after launching the policy at its annual conference. The party leader Andrew Little announced the policy would be for 18 to 24-year-olds who've been on job seeker benefit for 6 months. They would be paid the minimum wage to work for 6 months with the likes of DOC or charity groups. But media reports questioning the price tag of $60 million were described as a hatchet job and biased by the senior Labour MP Phil Twyford, a debate that has now spilled over into Parliament. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Labour has now distributed material showing how it arrived at the $60 million figure. It says it's based on the assumption not all people on the job scheme would stay in the job for the full 6 months, an assumption that did not appear in the original announcement. If the policy was costed on the full 6 months per person, the costing would have been closer to $90 million. Labour's Phil Twyford, who criticised media reports on Twitter, is not backing down.
There was no mistake in the numbers. The numbers add up. That is simply about the assumptions of the cost modelling. It is a very good policy. The modelling that went into the numbers was rational, it was logical, and we stand by them.
Mr Little was asked if he condones one of his MPs attacking journalists on social media.
I don't get to control what Labour MPs do on social media. If I did that, I'd be working even more hours of the day.
He is your campaign manager, though.
I don't get to control what Labour MPs do on Twitter or other social media. I expect them to exercise a level of responsibility. I'm very thankful that we have MPs who are passionate about Labour policies.
In Parliament, Mr Little asked the Prime Minister about figures showing the number of 18 to 24-year-olds on the job seeker benefit for more than a year is rising.
Why are there 11,400 more young people not in employment, education or training now than in 2008?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr Speaker, I can't verify those numbers, but the truth is Labor can't verify their own numbers even when they call it a policy.
Take your head out of the sand.
Order.
Mr Little challenged Mr Key about his government's approach to finding jobs for young people.
When will he stop talking down our young people as lazy and drug-addled and instead invest in their futures and get them ready for work just as Labour is proposing to do?
After detailing his government's record, Mr Key turned his sights on Labour.
Just because the Leader of the Opposition can't actually get a policy right at his 100th annual conference and now has been known as Angry Andrew with the journalists. Order. We've certainly gone far enough now.
Mr Little says he stands by the numbers given to the media and is satisfied with the way the policy was presented and the way the aftermath has been handled. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's coming up to 6 minutes to 6. A cheaper housing option for the capital's most vulnerable residents is a first for the country. Under the terms of the agreement, the Wellington City Council, which owns the houses, hands responsibilities for some of its tenancies to the Salvation Army, and the tenants pay lower rent. It's the first time the government's income-related rent subsidy will be offered through council housing. Catherine Hutton reports.
Under the terms of the partnership, people on the Ministry of Social Development's Social Housing Register will be housed in council units, with income-related rent. That makes a big difference to what people have been asked to pay, because while council rent is based on market rates, the MSD subsidy is based on income. Greg Coyle heads the Salvation Army's social housing unit and says it allows them to provide housing for those on very low incomes.
The costs of housing go from 70% of market down to 25% of their income, and that gives those people the opportunity to progress their lives a lot more than if the biggest cost to them is rent, and some of them find that cost is unaffordable.
Dr Coyle says the biggest demand is from older single people, many of whom have fallen out with their families, struggled with addiction or been released from prison. Not only will they receive a roof over their head and lower rent, but also wraparound services to help them get back on their feet, like this man.
We took a chap to an income-related rent property recently. He'd been at the night shelter a lot of time in the last few months. We put him straight into a one-bedroom flat, and he was absolutely delighted. And his rent was about $55, $60 a week from his benefit, and he was right near the Salvation Army services. He just said, "Wow, I can't believe this is a place that I could live in."
The council's Deputy Mayor Paul Eagle says only new tenants will be able to apply, but many of those who are eligible for council housing also meet the criteria for the income-related rents.
These will be new tenants, they will be eligible. So this is a workaround, this is a bit of a pilot, we're giving it a go, and what it says to government is, hey look, we are listening to you, but it doesn't mean that we have to sell down our stock or exit the provision of social housing.
The pilot is starting small with just 2 houses based in Newtown and the option of taking up to 20 houses, about 1% of the council's 2,200 units. Dr Coyle says it's a bit of a work in progress and the ministry has to approve the rents that the council is asking, but he's confident they will.
25% of the tenants' income comes to the Salvation Army, and MSD top up the rest to the level which they agree to pay.
And do they agree to always meet what the council wants?
Well, we haven't. The first 2 we have, and we've got an agreement that there'll be a fair discussion about that.
Paul Eagle says if successful, the council is keen to expand the scheme, as well as looking at other ways to increase the amount of social housing in Wellington, in an attempt to avoid Auckland's situation.
We know that we'll need roughly about 5,000 new affordable homes over the next 20 years, for example. And what we're saying is, what's the best way to build those?
Representatives from the council and the Salvation Army signed the first 2 leases at the council offices this afternoon. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
Thanks, Catherine. Lots of feedback coming in on Vicky Latelli, and let's have a sample of it. Re-cancer prisoner. Let us not forget there is her fraud victim. How much consideration has been shown by her to the victim, says Bob. Woman jailed for defrauding Victoria University released to house arrest because her husband having difficulty coping. But the woman with terminal cancer must stay in prison. Please explain, says Christine. Vicky Latelli's 3-year sentence was surely not intended to be a life sentence. What is Corrections' interest in keeping her in prison now with weeks to months to live? Corrections has not shown themselves capable of managing her symptoms both before and since her diagnosis. She should be home with her family. This is disgraceful. Yes, John, I've been wondering about the Vic Uni woman getting off. I'm not sure how I feel about Vicky getting off, but if Vic University woman can, why not Vicky? Stinks of racism and class inequity to me. Thank you for your feedback. Lots of it tonight. Just received an email forwarded to us from Megan down in Wellington, who is running social for us tonight. From Graham on Facebook, read the treatment of Vicky V. It makes me ashamed to be a Kiwi. If she was a knighted politician or some notable, I'm sure she would be at home. Here we have a normal person being crucified for some reason by a heartless system. Sorry, I don't get it. Really ashamed. Sorry, Vicky, for how you are being treated. So thank you for your feedback. And for those of you saying, yep, but what about her victims? What do they think about her being released? Thank you all. It's 1 minute to 6, which is Sting time. Just having a little bit more Sting tonight. I was enjoying it. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. After the news, revelations of the Correction Department was warned back in 2014 that fight clubs were probably being run in its Rimutaka and Ngāwhā prisons. Corrections is going to join us. Ray Smith is going to join us live. The extraordinary race for the White House enters its final hours, and a specialist school at the heart of our hour, the use of a seclusion room, finally breaks its silence to its own parents. Ian Telfer, our reporter, has been down there in Invercargill. All of that and more coming up after the 6 o'clock news with Paul Brennan and the Pips, of course.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. 2 children remain in a serious condition in hospital after a tree fell in the playground of an Auckland childcare centre this afternoon. 4 young children were hit by the tree, with 2 of them treated for moderate injuries. Emergency services were called to Discovery's Educare on Gillies Ave in Epsom just before 2 o'clock. The worker next door described hearing the tree crack before it fell, and a woman picking up her 4-year-old daughter, who was not injured, blamed the wind. The owners, who run 13 childcare centres throughout Auckland, could not be reached for comment. The mother of a Lower Hutt teenager who was fatally stabbed by her foster father says she's trying to work towards forgiving the man. Paul Skipper was jailed for life today by the High Court in Wellington and ordered to spend at least 16 years behind bars for the murder of Te Awhiahua Toko in April. Justice Clark said there were several aggravating features to his offending, including 2 earlier occasions on which he had hit the 17-year-old and his overbearing attitude towards her. Outside the court, Awhi Toko's mother, Tisha Paratini, said she wants people to remember her daughter's good points.
Awhi was very clever. She was such a loving person. She loved wholeheartedly. Despite whatever was happening in her life, she was always there for other people. I'd rather Awhi be remembered as the beautiful, aspiring model rather than the contents of what has happened to her.
Tisha Paratini said the whole experience has been devastating for her and her other children. In his last speech in the United States election campaign, President Barack Obama has given a roll call of reasons Donald Trump is not fit to be president. Mr. Obama told a rally for Hillary Clinton in Philadelphia the presidential campaign has felt more like a reality show or a parody, but the choice voters face tomorrow could not be more serious. He warned if Mr. Trump was elected, he would trigger a trade war that would cost jobs, strip 20 million Americans of their health insurance, and roll back regulations to protect the environment.
On the economy, Donald Trump is uniquely unqualified to be our chief executive. On foreign policy, Donald Trump is temperamentally unfit to be commander-in-chief. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the Republicans who've refused to support him.
President Barack Obama. Newly released information from the Corrections Department shows it was warned in 2014 that fight clubs were probably being run in Rimutaka and Ngāwhā prisons. The department today released 3 more reports from 2009, 2014 and 2015, which the final report into organised fights at Mount Eden Prison referred to when it was released last month. The 2014 Special Monitors investigation concluded that not only was there organised fighting among prisoners at the privately run Mount Eden jail, but that inmates had told it of other fight clubs at the other 2 state-run prisons in Upper Hutt and Northland. It's unclear what, if anything, corrections did about the other 2 prisons. However, late last month, it said there was no evidence of fight clubs at prisons other than Mount Eden after inspections in 2015 at 8 jails, including Ngāwhā, but excluding Rimutaka. A company forced to publicly release hundreds of blacked-out pages of information about a proposed seabed mining operation off Taranaki says it will do so immediately. Trans-Tasman Resources wants to mine iron sand from up to 66 square kilometres of seabed off the coast of Patea, but had censored some information about the operation. Max Toll reports.
The company said it wanted to protect sensitive data that would be incredibly valuable to its rivals. Kiwis Against Seabed Mining then applied to the Environment Court, saying the application should be publicly released to show its potential environmental impact. In a decision this afternoon, Judge Brian Dwyer said he did not consider the information a trade secret, and the public interest vastly outweighed the interests of Trans-Tasman Resources. After the decision was read, the company said it would release the censored information as soon as possible. Cormax told Tene.
A cheaper housing option for the capital's most vulnerable residents is a first for the country. The Wellington City Council, which owns the houses, is handing responsibilities for up to 20 of its houses to the Salvation Army, and the tenants will pay lower rent. It's the first time the government's income-related rent subsidy will be offered for council housing. The Salvation Army's social housing manager, Greg Coyle, says it will benefit those on very low incomes.
The costs of housing go from 70% of market down to 25% of their income. And that gives those people the opportunity to progress their lives a lot more than if the biggest cost to them is rent, and some of them find that cost is unaffordable.
The Salvation Army's Greg Coyle. It's 6:05. To sport now, the favourite Lazarus has cruised to victory in the New Zealand Trotting Cup at Addington in Christchurch. Driver Mark Purdon, 4-year-old Lazarus, led for a large part of the race and crossed the line 10 lengths clear of second-placed Tiger Tiara in a record cup time. Third was Titan Banner. It's the fourth time Purdon has driven the cup winner.
It was just a marvellous, the time just astounds me. I just had a handful of horse around the corner and I said, come on boy, let's get a break now, and honestly just put it beyond doubt in about 50 metres.
Mark Purdon talking to Trackside TV. Joseph Parker's former manager, Sir Robert Jones, is calling the New Zealand boxers' upcoming heavyweight title fight, a world championship bout, is a joke. Parker's promoters, Juco Events, have confirmed today Parker will fight American-Mexican Andy Ruiz for the WBO World Heavyweight title at Auckland's Vector Arena on the 10th of December. However, Sir Robert says to claim the fight as a World Championship title is ridiculous, with several different boxing organisations around offering a variety of world titles.
All these outfits purport by their name, they have annual conferences to try and give themselves some sort of a thing. You can't have, imagine if there were 7 Olympic committees running 7 different Olympic games with 7 different Olympic champions in every event. Well, that's the exact situation you've got now. It's destroyed championship boxing.
Sir Robert says Parker should beat Ruiz within 6 rounds. That's the news. Tonight on Nights, we talk to Kate Camp, who's in Washington, D.C. on the eve of the U.S. election. We speak with Eric Crampton from the New Zealand Initiative on Inequality in New Zealand. Nick Bollinger explores the Nordic noir of Berlin-based Danish-born Onus Obel in the sampler. We have a window on the world. And our Tuesday feature is another Wreath lecture. And there's more. Tonight after the news at 7 on Nights, RNZ National. A check with the weather now, the short forecast from Met Service. It takes us through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday, for Northland all the way to Wellington. That includes Coromandel Peninsula, Taupo, Taumarunui, Taihape. Fine for the rest of today. Cloudy periods develop tomorrow. A few showers from Taranaki southwards tomorrow evening. Fine for Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Showers become confined to north of Wairoa about now, becoming fine throughout tomorrow morning. However, a few showers in the afternoon about the ranges tomorrow. Wairarapa, Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, mostly fine. However, a few showers later tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland. Rain with heavy falls. They should spread north for the rest of today. Thunderstorms are possible. The rain should clear from the south tomorrow, though. Otago and Southland, high cloud, a few spots of rain. That should clear up in the morning, apart from a few coastal showers through the day tomorrow. And at the Chathams, cloudy, patchy drizzle. That should clear up in the morning, but a few showers redevelop tomorrow afternoon. It's exactly 6:08.
Thanks, Paul. Some breaking news. It's been revealed that the Corrections Department was warned back in 2014 that fight clubs were probably being run in its Rimutaka and Ngāwhā prisons. Now, remember, of course, this had its sequel in the Serco Mount Eden prison. Prison fight clubs hit the headlines after footage showing organised fighting at the Serco-run Mount Eden prison was made public. The department has now stepped in and is running the prison. Lots of coverage of that. But Corrections today released 3 more reports, which were referred to in the Chief Inspector's report into the circumstances surrounding those fight clubs. Corrections Chief Executive Ray Smith is on the line. Hi, Ray. How are you?
Good evening, John. How are you going?
Yeah, good. Except, Ray, the timing of this release smells, and I want you to explain to me why you had to put these 3 reports out at 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, the day before the US elections, with no notice, no advance warning, no media briefing. What are you trying to hide, Ray?
Oh, absolutely nothing. That's why they're out there. So, John, there'd been some OIA requests for the information. I thought the best thing to do was to get it out so everybody had it all at the same time.
Right, all at the same time, all at 4:30 today.
Well, sorry, John. I think it was better to get the information out.
When did the first OAAs go in? When did the first OAAs go in? I mean, you're making this sound like a rush job. It's not, is it?
Well, not rushing anything here. I mean, the point is that I'm here talking to you on your show because I'm available to talk about these things. We got the issue out there, and I'm happy to chat you through the report.
Okay, let's talk about how it was that fight clubs were being run in Rimutaka and Ngāwhā prisons. Corrections knew that and somehow turned and looked the other way.
No, that's absolutely not right. I don't think that there's ever been any substantiated evidence that they were run at Ngāwhā or Rimutaka. And actually, that was one of the difficulties with that early report. 15 months ago, actually on this show and on many others, I talked about the fact that that report had been done and that I had never seen it and it hadn't been escalated to me, which I think was unfortunate. But the issue with the report was we just didn't have the evidence. And as soon as I saw that YouTube footage, we moved very quickly.
So what? When you say it wasn't escalated to you, what wasn't escalated? What was known that wasn't passed up the line?
Well, that report was done by two special monitors who looked into Mount Eden Prison because we were concerned at the time about allegations we'd received. Unfortunately, the report wasn't considered to have had enough substantiation of evidence. I looked at it myself and thought, look,
Sorry, you just said it wasn't passed up the line. I'm a bit confused. When did you look at it?
I didn't see it until, I think, roughly the 18th or 20th of July in 2015, John. So you might remember when the Fight Club videos broke.
Absolutely, I do remember.
The issue came up, and actually I had thought that these matters had never been substantiated. I'd heard about them over time, as you do with things. I was really surprised. No, I was really surprised that there was a report that was in existence. So I got the report and I read it, and I've commented publicly. In fact, I spent a day in the media saying, look, I was surprised when I read the report. I found it sobering reading. I was disappointed it wasn't escalated, but I did understand that much of the report just didn't have the evidence. Now, as soon as I saw those YouTube videos and put that together, I immediately stepped in at Mount Eden and we got that Chief Inspector's report going.
How hard were you trying to find the evidence? And that's the question, isn't it? Because it's my understanding that the KPIs you and your department are operating under are so prescriptive and so intimidating that the best thing to do in the face of evidence is not find it. How hard did you drill down to find evidence which was clearly, as it turned out, correct and prescient?
Well, actually very hard and all the way through that contract, because up until that point I had penalised Serco up to $1.6 million on that contract for issues where I thought they weren't managing the prison properly. There was a settlement reached, you'll recall, which was around the $8 million mark earlier this year. And, I set the Chief Inspector a task to go and find what he could. That was challenged in court, and we won that proceeding, and I have released everything that I could find out about what was happening in that jail. I mean, the good thing now is that actually it's running very well, and we've been able to turn that around. But there was a period of time there where I think the jail suffered from a lack of staff, and that had been an issue that I had pursued for a long time.
Yes, I'm looking now at the 2014 Special Monitors investigation, which makes a number of recommendations, including that staffing levels are sufficient to provide continuous supervision. Ray, that shouldn't have to be a recommendation, should it? I mean, that's the business you're in, isn't it? Continuous supervision. What on earth do you even have to have that as a recommendation for?
Well, the point is, at Mount Eden, at that time when Serco were running it, is that I had been, along with my executive team colleagues, pushing for improvements in the staffing for some considerable time. And I've said that before publicly, that's not new information. And, the reality was that we always felt that the place needed more staffing, and I think the material issues that arose there were because rosters were not filled properly, and at times there was a lack of staffing.
And at times also there was lack of transparency around what the roster actually said and what the reality was, right?
Well, absolutely. That came out in the Chief Inspector's report. I think the critical thing here, John, is that all the way along we have sought to investigate where we should to find information.
How hard though, Ray? It seems to me you're stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea, or something. What is it, a rock in a hard place, or whatever that saying goes, because you and I, admit it now, your KPIs are prescriptive, aren't they? I mean, and the best thing to do is actually to not see stuff sometimes. And it just reeks a little bit of that, Ray.
No, well, I would argue that you have to have strong KPIs and you have to have strong targets and you have to be able to measure them. Otherwise, you will get, you could get any level of performance, and that would be unsatisfactory for a $300 million contract. But what I would also say is that everybody that works in these systems has to act with integrity, like any system. And you can't, at the end of the day, people have to tell the truth, they have to be honest, and they have to run these operations to the best of their ability. Now, I think there were some times when some very good things happened in that prison in the time that it was being run by Serco, and there was a period there where it failed, and we've identified that and we've remedied it.
Okay, thanks, Ray, for joining us. Obviously, there will be more examination. Just before you go, Vicky Latelli, can you guys look after her? Should she be in a corrections institution or should she be cared for elsewhere?
Oh, well, John, it's I feel very sorry for the Latelli family. I think cancer is an awful thing to have to contend with. I know about it because I've been intimately involved with it, and I absolutely understand how the family must be feeling, and I'll do everything I can to treat this case compassionately. You can guarantee that.
Ray Smith joining us live. Thanks, Ray. We appreciate your time this evening. All of this is breaking news this evening. It's 6:15. It was a race through several battleground states today for the US presidential candidates in their last big push before Election Day. The latest poll gives Hillary Clinton a 90% chance of defeating Donald Trump. It has her on track to win 303 Electoral College votes, well above the 270 needed. The BBC's John Campbell has been travelling with her and has filed this report.
Hillary Clinton relaxed and joking with the press entourage, posing for photos before the final frantic push. This lunchtime Pittsburgh, this afternoon Michigan, this evening Philadelphia, midnight North Carolina, and then back home to New York in the small hours. And when she spoke to the BBC, she was in reflective mood about the wider challenges ahead.
I think I have some work to do to bring the country together. As I've been saying in these speeches in the last few days, I really do want to be the president for everybody, people who vote for me, people who vote against me, because I think that these splits, these divides that have been not only exposed but exacerbated by the campaign on the other side are ones that we really do have to bring the country together.
And she struck a similar note when she landed in Pittsburgh.
We can do this! We don't have to accept a dark and divisive vision for America. Tomorrow you can vote for a hopeful, inclusive, big-hearted America.
I would like to introduce to you the next president of the United States, Miss Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton may not be a charismatic campaigner, but she's had formidable backup. She's been on stage with Jay-Z, Beyonce, and a whole host of other A-listers from the worlds of entertainment, sport and film. But leave aside the campaign muscle, the one running theme of her bid for the White House has been the corrosive saga of her use of a private email account from when she was Secretary of State.
The American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
Thank you. Me too. Me too.
And who knows what damage the FBI has done with its two bizarre interventions in the final weeks of the campaign, when early voting was already underway. This evening, Americans will see this one last ad from Hillary Clinton, one last appeal. And after the harshness of the campaign, a strikingly softer, more personal tone.
So tonight, I'm asking for your vote. And tomorrow, let's make history together. I'm Hillary Clinton, and one last time, I approve this message.
Tens of thousands of miles travelled, hundreds of millions of dollars spent. Tomorrow, she'll find out whether it's all been worth it.
The BBC's John Campbell with that report. Donald Trump, meanwhile, blitzed through 5 states today. Incredible. Marking an end to what must be the most improbable and controversial of presidential bids for a very long time. The BBC's Gavin Hewitt has been travelling with Mr. Trump.
Donald Trump brought his closing arguments to North Carolina.
I'm not a politician, I can say proudly. My only special interest is you. It's you. Tomorrow's going to be a very historic day. I really believe that. I think it's going to show. I think it's going to be a Brexit plus, plus, plus. Does that make sense? Plus, plus, plus.
Led our country
dry.
Donald Trump has spent $4 million on his last 2-minute TV commercial.
That have robbed our working class.
He describes his campaign as a movement taking aim at global power structures, including financiers and bankers.
And we will make America great again.
Whatever happens, it has been an incredible journey that has changed American politics. A political outsider, a man who has never held public office, could yet win the presidency. Here was a candidate from the reality TV stable, vain, combative, thin-skinned, comfortable with trading insults. But his large crowd saw a billionaire property developer willing to tear down the walls of the Washington establishment. He broke rules, was willing to cause offense.
I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
He trampled on the traditions of political debate, casually calling Hillary Clinton names to her face.
Such a nasty trust fund.
He mocked a disabled reporter.
Poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
He denounced Mexican migrants as rapists.
They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
He threatened to exclude Muslims from America.
Is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
His appeal was mainly to white voters, that somehow he would restore America's greatness, bring back jobs, and reduce the number of migrants by building a wall along the Mexican border.
Grab him by the could do anything.
His campaign was nearly derailed by the emergence of old footage where he's heard bragging about using his fame to grope women. But he managed to survive the scandal. In the end, many of his supporters loathed Hillary Clinton more than Donald Trump's comments about women. If he wins, America will have taken a step into the unknown, with a leader who casts doubts on international agreements. If Donald J. Trump captures the White House, both America and the world will be entering a new and uncertain era.
6:21. Don't forget, we are on air from 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon with our US election coverage, and we have the resources of the BBC and CNN behind us, plus our own team of excellent correspondents. Do join us from 3 tomorrow. A teenager fatally stabbed by her foster father lived in fear of him, was trying to escape him when she was killed. Paul Skipper was jailed for life by the High Court in Wellington and ordered to spend at least 16 years behind bars for the murder of the 17-year-old. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May was at the hearing.
Paul Skipper believed his foster daughter was having a sexual relationship with her boyfriend. Awhi Toko denied the relationship but decided to go and stay at the boy's home. Before she had a chance to leave, Skipper locked the boy's parents outside the house, isolating Ms Toko from their protection. Justice Clark said Skipper grabbed a boning knife from the kitchen, struck Awhi Toko with it, and she later died in hospital.
The nature of the attack was both brutal and cruel. Having cut Awhi's throat, you stabbed her twice in the chest, and your violence only stopped when others intervened. She, in effect, bled to death, notwithstanding medical intervention.
A statement from Awhi Toko's boyfriend, Nathaniel Gonzalez, was read to the court, in which he wondered whether he could have done more to save her. Skipper also read a letter to the court saying Awhi Toko was loved by those who knew her and he had extinguished that light.
No, she did not deserve what I did. Yes, she deserved to be loved, cared for, to enjoy a long and happy life. I am sorry, it is the only thing I can offer, because even now I have no understanding or explanation for the why.
However, Justice Clark said the stabbing was not the first occasion Skipper had assaulted Awhi Toko. She said in recent years he had become increasingly possessive and overbearing, especially about Awhi Toko having boyfriends, and had previously hit her for not answering his questions.
The second assault was in 2015 and was equally unprovoked. It seems you became angry with Awhi when she received text messages from her friends. There was an argument and you punched her as she lay on the floor of her bedroom. Again, the assault continued until a family member intervened to stop it.
Justice Clark gave Skipper a 1-year sentence discount to recognise his early guilty plea and the fact he was a first-time offender. Outside the court, Awhi Toko's mother, Tisha Paratene, said the whole experience has been devastating for her and her children, and she wants people to remember how kind her daughter was.
Awhi was very clever. She was such a loving person. She loved wholeheartedly. Despite whatever was happening in her life, she was always there for other people. I'd rather Awhi be remembered as the beautiful, aspiring model rather than the contents of what has happened to her.
Tisha Paratene said she's trying to work towards forgiving Skipper because holding a grudge against him won't help her. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
A special school at the heart of a row about the use of a seclusion room has broken its silence and written to parents defending the room's use. The Education Minister, Hekia Parata, last week announced she would ban the use of seclusion rooms after finding they'd been used at 8 special schools. The Chief Ombudsman is also investigating. We've covered this at length on Checkpoint. It follows a December 2014 complaint by Victoria and Callum Turnbull, who withdrew their autistic son from Ruru Specialist School in Invercargill after discovering he'd been restrained and driven to the school's seclusion room from a satellite campus. A police investigation is now stalled because Ruru school staff have invoked a right to silence. But the principal, Erin Cairns, has now sent a letter to parents. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with our reporter Ian Telfer outside the school and asked him what the letter said, what the principal's saying.
Now, in the letter, she says that these were never a seclusion room. So at this school, she says this was what they called a safe room, and she said that it was totally in accordance with the ministry's guidelines, both the old ones and the new ones published last week. So she's saying that it conforms. Secondly, she says that the room was not unpleasant. The ministry had described it in one report as unpleasant and dingy. And she says, no, it had a large window, natural light, and that it was used only sparingly. It was used for never for punishment, she said, and never for locking the door and keeping kids away, but simply to de-escalate a situation where a pupil was at risk, or other pupils were at risk, or staff were at risk. So she talked about extreme behaviours. So all of that was effectively a defence of what they're calling now their safe room. Now, she says it hasn't been used since the original complaint by the Turnbulls in December 2014, but nonetheless, they do believe it complies.
Right. Does the letter talk about the police investigation and the school's attitude towards it?
Well, a little bit, John. It doesn't directly address it, but it does say that staff have been taking advice from legal counsel, so their lawyers, and they've decided not to cooperate with the police investigation. Now, it's a little bit unclear exactly what the status of the police investigation is, because in this letter, Mrs. Cairns says that there was an original police investigation and that the school fully complied, that the police even came and visited this school room. But then the police investigation has re-kicked off, as we know, because of an intervention, it seems, by the Independent Police Conduct Authority after complaint by the Turnbulls. And so now it seems that the second time around, a more thorough investigation by the police, that the individual staff members have chosen not to cooperate with that. And I have been told today by Victoria Turnbull, who made the complaint, that the principal herself, Mrs. Cairns, is not complying with the police, that the police have told her that. And that does seem unusual and surprising, but it may be indeed that the whole of the school is not cooperating any longer.
Yes, certainly. When we asked Hekia Parata about that, she said it was unusual and surprising that the school wasn't cooperating with the police investigation. Is the school commenting, other than the letter itself? You're obviously there. Are they saying anything to you or to RNZ generally?
No, John, not as far as I know. They haven't commented to anyone, really. This letter has been the first thing that has been published from the school, as far as I know. And certainly today, when I rang and asked for an interview with to speak to the principal, I was told no, I needed to send an email. I did that. I've had no response. I've sent follow-up emails and still no response. And I'm here outside the school and I've let them know, and she's not coming to meet us. So I think that's unlikely. I also contacted the police today to see whether we could get an update on their investigation. They would give absolutely nothing, except to say the investigation is ongoing. So I guess we're in a situation where we need to wait until there are further developments to get some answers.
It's Ian Telfer, who was outside Rudu School in Invercargill. No one came out to talk to him. They still have not spoken to us, but they have finally sent a letter to parents clarifying that the seclusion room, which was described, I think, as dark and grimy by the Ministry of Education review, was not a dark or grimy or indeed a seclusion room. We would love to talk to someone from Rudu School about what was happening there. We do suspect, though, that that is highly unlikely. There's a minute to go. Should we have the sting underneath? We're just getting really good value for money out of the sting tonight. Bring it in. Bring that sucker in. There it is. We're going to end tonight by reminding you that from 3 tomorrow afternoon we have a US election special. This is new and uncharted territory for Radio New Zealand. Not doing election specials. Radio New Zealand has done many, many, many. But for the first time we will have the BBC and also CNN and its pictures available to us. So you will be able to watch this on Freeview Channel 50 online or listen to us on the radio. It's going to be a 3 or 4 hour show. We will stay on here until we know who the president is. Well, that's a big promise because I guess we may not know if there are Supreme Court issues, but we think we will have one tomorrow. So do join us from 3. Our own correspondents, the excellent Simon Marks and his team, our political team, our business team, the BBC and CNN from 3 here tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The owner of the Auckland daycare centre where a tree fell on children, injuring 4, says 2 of the youngsters have head injuries. MPs have been given a near 2.5% pay rise, taking the ordinary backbencher's salary to $160,000. A repeat child sex offender giggled in the dock of the High Court in Auckland as the Crown prosecutor asked the judge to jail him for an indefinite period. The police are pleased with the behaviour of racegoers at today's Trotting Cup in Christchurch, which was won by the favourite Lazarus, and 2 men face street racing charges over a crash that killed 4 people in Waikato in June. Those are the headlines. We'll have our next news and weather at 7.
Danish-born, Berlin-based Agnes Obel might make the musical equivalent of Nordic noir. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be reviewing her latest album in The Sampler. I'll be discussing the guitar